This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast.
Speaking of live listeners, that's a benefit of being a Patreon. And if you're a Patreon and you become one in the last 6 months, we're sorry. We wanted to thank you earlier and are just now getting around to it. But we do have a list of Patreons who have been supporting us, who we would love to thank. You've been super generous. And of course, a huge thank you always goes out to our long-standing existing patrons who continue to support us month after month, week after week, episode after episode, book after book, con after con. So I know we've been absent for the last 3 weeks, and we just wanted to start off by saying, thank you to everyone who's been an existing Patreon, and of course, our new Patreons who have joined in 2023.
Starting with Scott Helsby,
Kevin Doyle,
Amanda Propek,
Raymond,
Lisa Beekia. Thank you for the pronunciation guide in your name. Appreciate
always
that.
Appreciated.
Beekia.
I'm just bitter that you got the pronunciation guide and I didn't. I've just got to go on and read the rest of the names without
You've
help.
got the most amazing name coming up next, though.
I believe this one is Dire Waffle. Wonderful, wonderful Dire Waffle.
Jane. Thank you very much, Jane.
All right. Helene Leipelt Neisted? You don't think that? You think that T is silent there at the end?
Well, I think in the DT, there's a sound in between the two that we're just not particularly familiar with.
Fair enough.
But I don't think you're supposed to say DT. I think there's a sound that those two things together make. I'm assuming. It's a very cool looking name. Neisted. I don't know. Next up, we have a nice, easy name. Thank you to Alex Boyer. I'm sure I butchered that. Now I've actually said it out loud. Alex was easy.
Yeah.
Boyer.
Just very, very Americanized on that one.
I like to yankify as hard as I can with that nasal twang.
Well, let me go with Ken Davidson. That's Ken Davidson. Thank you very, very much, Ken.
Brittany Diltz.
Spencer R.
Len LaGuardia. Hannah
Gahn.
Jonathan Hunt.
Del Wagner.
Delililililililili. Makes me feel like Miril. ILLE. Delil Wagner. Delilililililili.
There's not that many.
No, you're not. You're right.
It's ILLE. Yeah.
It's terrible. Too many L's.
Only because the I looks like an L.
Exactly. I's and L's shouldn't be allowed together in names. It's bad for my brain. Evan McGloin.
Jeff Zanin.
And finally, Ash Ant. Thank you to everyone on this list, and thank you to everyone who is a current supporter, and thank you to everyone who has ever been a supporter in any way, shape, or form for any duration of time.
Really, it is you that are keeping this podcast going, right? We love doing it, but it takes support, it takes effort, it takes you guys. It's hard to run a podcast when you're also doing a full-time job. I
mean, I wouldn't know, but it's hard to fall into being a podcast producer when you absolutely did not go to college for that.
Hard, or is that just something that you've naturally managed to do?
It feels gravitational, so I guess it was just meant to be.
Opposites attract? Wait, no.
No, this is definitely a likes attract situation. This is a birds of a feather flocking together sort of thing.
But it's funny. You think of electromagnets, right? You got opposites repelling, or opposites attract, and things that are the same repel. But in gravity, mass always attracts other mass.
Yeah, this has felt like a very gravitational progression to me. College was maybe a bit more of a electromagnetic sort of thing.
You kept getting pushed in there and it kept pushing you back away.
There was a dynamo that was created by the friction, that kind of powered everything. But then it shot me out on an exit trajectory and I landed somewhere in the woods.
See, whereas I think I was on more of a long orbit, right? It shot me way out of college, but then, and I had to go through all of this crap before I came back to doing what I went to college for.
Yeah, very cometary kind of orbit sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Just call me Halley's Comet.
Basically.
Or Halsey's Comet.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. You can be Halsey's Comet. That's fine.
All right. I'll go with that. For those, that's the Halsey song from the season 2 trailer that just came out, which I'm not entirely sure when you're dropping it, but we recorded an episode reacting to the season 2 trailer as well as talking about WatCon, and that has either just come out or will come out soon.
Yeah, it'll come out before this episode airs.
Cool.
Either way.
Go back, check out our opinions, and now we're back to your regularly scheduled chapter of Egwene talking to Aes Sedai.
Yeah. We thought that there was enough to do here and enough other real stuff to do in a separate episode that, if you don't want that content, you can just skip it entirely and come here where we will simply be lost in Aes Sedai name salad without any trailer talk whatsoever.
Salad. So we decided that these 2 chapters were enough of a continuation of each other, as well as sort of touching on the same subjects that we're doing a 2 for today. Chapter 17, Secrets, and Chapter 18, A Chat with Suian.
Awesome. And we're doing we're getting to the end of our cleansing POVs, but we are doing Elza and Osangar having their little encounter détente thing.
Yes.
And that will those two go together very, very well.
They go extremely
POVs,
well.
So
yeah.
That's a fun treat that I think we should start with.
Okay, excellent. So I will bring up... I had Crossroads out. I had to pull up Winter's Heart.
So I think you should just read Osangar, and then I should just read Elza. Because they're both short, and then we can actually get that little trade-off narrator experience. It'll be fun.
Getting to the right spot.
How dare you not be prepared? What do I pay you for?
You don't.
That would explain it then, doesn't it?
That's right. Scrambling to the top of the hill, Osangar dropped to the ground on his belly and smiled as he crabbed sideways to shelter behind a tree. From here, with Saidin in him, he could see the next crest clearly and the people on it. Not as many as he had expected. One woman was making a slow circuit around the crest, peering into the trees, but everyone else was still. Narishma sitting with Kalendor glowing in his hands, and a woman's head on his knee. There were 2 other women that Osangar could see, one kneeling over the other, but they were obscured by a man's back. He did not need to see the man's face to know al'Thor. The key lying on the ground at his side named him. To Osangar's eyes, it shone brightly. In his head, it overwhelmed the sun. 1,000 suns. What he could do with that. A pity it had to be destroyed along with al'Thor. But still, he could take Kalendor after al'Thor was dead. No one else among the Chosen possessed so much as an Angreal. Even Moradin would quail before him once he had that crystal sword. Nabliss? Osangar would be named Nabliss after he destroyed al'Thor and undid all that he had done here. Laughing softly, he wove balefire. Who would have thought that he would turn out to be the hero of the day?
Walking slowly, studying the forested hills around them, Elza suddenly stopped as a flicker of movement caught the corner of her eye. She turned her head slowly, and not as far as the hill where she had seen that flash. The day had been very difficult for her. In her captivity among the Aiel tents at Cairhien, it had come to her that it was paramount for the Dragon Reborn to reach the last battle. It had suddenly become so blindingly obvious that it astounded her she had not seen it before. Now it was clear to her, as clear as Saidar made the face of the man trying to hide on that hill while peeking around a tree trunk. Today, she had been forced to fight the Chosen. Surely the Great Lord would understand if she had actually killed any of them, but Corlin Dashiva was only one of those Ashaman. Dashiva raised his hand slowly toward the hill where she stood, and she drew as hard as she could on Kalendor and Jahar's hands. Saidin seemed well suited to destruction, to her. A huge ball of coruscating fire surrounded the other hilltop, red and gold and blue. When it was gone, that other hill ended in a smooth surface 50 feet lower than the old crest.
End of Osangar.
Exit stage fireball.
Right.
It's like exit pursued by absolute incineration instead of pursued by a bear.
And you can just see the Dark One rolling his eyes and being like, nah, I'm letting that one go this time. Like, it's just like, dumbass.
Yeah, and this is definitely where I learned the word coruscating. Thanks, RJ.
Oh, okay.
Thesaurus of a moment. Love that word.
Would you care to define that for the rest of us who weren't paying attention?
I mean, it's in context, it's a flaming, shimmering, falling over. I'm assuming it's kind of like a cascade, right? Because it says a coruscating fire, a huge ball of coruscating fire. So I'm imagining like a shimmery, rippling, cascading kind of thing. I have no idea if that's what it means, but if it means something else, the fuck is it doing in that sentence?
Well, let's see. Because my book has a lookup function. Adjective, flashing, sparkling, a coruscating kaleidoscope of colors, brilliant or striking in content or style, to flash or to sparkle.
Yeah, I'd say I approximated that.
Yeah, we got there. Context is great. That's how we learn most of our words, right?
That is how I have such a large vocabulary, is because I just use words as I've seen them used before. And every now and then I get called on my shit because I took the wrong context cues from how I learned a word. But most of the time people go, wow, you have a really big vocabulary. It's like, because I read books.
Or you pronounce the words wrong because you've only ever read them, but you're using them correctly. You just pronounce them incorrectly.
That's not the same. That's a different kind of getting called on my shit. That's more just getting called out on my learning style. You know what's cool though is my great grandfather wrote his memoirs, and in that he describes literally doing something similar when he was in college. Just like in the course of writing his memoirs, he found old cards that he had written words that he didn't know and their definitions on, just like as he was reading books. He's like, there's some fun notes from my 40 years ago. I think I'll include that as a little sidebar in my memoir. So, and also what I got when I was loaning these books out to a friend recently and getting them back, I've been going through the books I'm podcasting through right now. Every now and then I'll find a sticky note with a word written on it and its definition, because as she was reading the books, she came across a word she didn't know, and she actually wrote down a sticky note and just left it in the book as she was going through, exactly like my great grandfather. So
that's adorable.
I am not the only one. I'm sure 90% of the audience is nodding to some degree.
Yeah, I think I just go through on rereads and I'll investigate from context clues a little bit more. But I never really did a lot of looking up of words. But just through rereads and reading lots and lots of books, I feel like I've picked up a lot of vocabulary. Because looking up words never did it for me, right? They'd always be like, look it up. And I'd be like, well, I don't know how it's spelled. And they'd be like, well, how do you think it's spelled? And I'd tell them, and they'd be like, no, that's wrong. And I'd be like, well, that's why I was asking in the first place. I got really frustrated with the way teachers would try and approach that. Possibly because I different neurotypical abilities.
Different neurotype.
Neurotype, yes, thank you. That's the word. Yeah, just because I couldn't come up with letters. I'm like, I don't know. The English language has no rules. They make up letters all the time.
Super valid.
Right? They teach me these rules, and I'd be like, well, here's the rule. And then, they'd break it, the next word. And I'd be like, well, then why do we even learn the rule? What's the point?
Absolutely.
Just give me a list of words that follow the rules.
So an ebook where you could just long press a word and a dictionary thesaurus function just arrives, you're happy to look words up. This is fine.
Sure.
But
yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, that nonsense is... dictionaries are a challenge for me because I'll just get sucked into reading the whole thing and none of it will stick. I'll be reading it and it will be going in one eye and out the other. Right,
because there's no context for those words. They're just raw definitions.
But I get lost in just reading them, being like, there's a lot of words, even within the context of the definitions. And I'll remember the most random things and get completely distracted from whatever I was trying to look up. So,
speaking of completely distracted from what we were trying to do.
Right. Big bada boom. Coruscating fire. Focus.
Which, I think, so remember we talked about earlier how Cadsuane had sort of taken a little power away from her shield to try and heal Nynaeve of her exhaustion. And so in that moment, they were vulnerable. So I think there is a argument to be made that in that moment, Osangar had a real chance of taking out the dragon.
Yeah. I wasn't sure about the timing of that when you pointed it out before, but it is rather overwhelmingly evident here that the moment that Cadsuane is feeling nervous about lessening the power over her head, she is extremely correct to be feeling that way. And only Elza, the compulsed dark friend, because yes, compulsed is a word. Everyone who doesn't like it can bite me.
Right.
That is the only reason why Cadsuane's apprehension feels like a red herring. No. She's super right that she's in danger, and this could have been the end, but Elza comes through for us.
Which is funny. So, again, because I was listening to this part of the book, so I may be a little off, but there's a part where Egwene is thinking that she's caught Rand having compelled sisters. And I think what she's actually done is caught Varen doing the compelling.
Agreed. I caught that reference as well and was like, you're correct about the compulsion. And you're almost correct about it being Rand, because Varen is doing it explicitly for him in ways that she thinks he should be doing it, more or less, according to Varen's master plan for the world. You're almost there, but you just got to account for a triple agent sister, which is hard to account for. So
the purple Aja.
You know. But yeah, she's definitely picking up on the fact that compulsion is part of the equation. She's just blaming the wrong person.
But yeah, we are getting very much to the end of the cleansing, right? Because I think the next little bit is basically the wrap up.
We have 2 more POVs. We've got the Mogedian POV and then the omnipresent POV. We are basically done. We have hit the climax as far as the timeline is concerned. There's just a moment of wrap up with one POV and then the Omni POV, but it really is the aftermath vibe for these last 2 chapters that we're going to get through.
And here where we have Halima popping into this next chapter, that's clearly after the battle. She's recovered. She's back from the cleansing. She hasn't died or anything like that, right? We don't get a lot of resolution in the cleansing from all the characters' perspectives, but we see them later just going about their business. So they've obviously survived and traveled away. That's, I guess, when the day is over and the cleansing is done, they all just opened gateways and booked it out of there.
Yeah, I guess so. Because lots of the channelers didn't get tapped out in the course of the battle because they were just sitting back as batteries. So for them to be able to weave a gateway to get out is not a huge stretch.
And I feel like it was a pretty sparse battle, right? Because you had the 7 or 8 Forsaken that showed up and are still alive at the most. And then you had, the 4 or 5 or 6 little groups that got sent out.
Well, they get into gun battles all day. They're in little firefights across the day.
But little firefights are going on. But that's, you're talking a grand total of, 50 people on the battlefield.
It's small compared to Dumai's Wells. I will grant you that.
Yeah. And pretty much any other major battle. But the amount of power being slung is almost massively outsized compared to any other battle we've seen. I would say there's much more power being flung around than at Dumai's Wells, because you got Kalendor being used, you've got all the Forsaken who are extremely powerful. You don't have the numbers of channelers, but the raw power is out of this world. Yeah,
it's comparable to how much power everyone's afraid could get used in battle when they think about the 3 O's. And they're like, we're sure glad that's not happening. This is exceeding that scale of power, even though, it's just a battle between channelers, so they don't need entire walls of people running into meat grinders like a traditional army. It's just the high-powered channelers.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of Angreal.
Which makes me think of a question I had about this. Osangar thinks that no one else among the Chosen possessed so much as an Angreal, and that's empirically false.
Yeah, because we know Grendal's got the little golden ring.
Yeah.
At this point, I'm not entirely sure where Demandred is in his journey, but he should be claiming his chalice relatively soon, his Sangreal.
Mm-hmm. And wasn't there a stash of Terangreal that multiple of them have rifled through? There's magic artifacts floating around among the Chosen. I don't know what this line is of being nobody else has any cool toys from the Age of Legends. It's dude, what?
artifacts, lots of ter'angreal, but no ongreal. It's been this weird running thing that, like, all these caches that our main characters keep stumbling upon, the Forsaken are looking for but never find, right? All these situations where the Forsaken are looking for ter'angreal, and usually the Supergirls get to them first, which is why they have all these ongreal in stores. And the people who do, like, Lanfear and Asmodean were the two who may have seen the ongreal in the Waste, but they're both dead or out of the picture.
Right, yeah.
You know, they've picked up this, I think Moradin picked up the stasis box, right? And that was full of interesting toys, none of them ongreal.
I suppose so.
So as far as I know, the only ongreal that any of the Forsaken have right now is the little golden ring that Grendel carries.
Huh. That's just so hard to believe with all of our main cast just having them coming out of their damn ears.
We've talked about it, especially with, like, why can you not just send a Black Sister? Why does Mesa-Ana not have the ivory rod?
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Okay, yeah.
Like, it seems so crazy to me that the Forsaken haven't been able to put their hands on any of them. And we've talked about this in the past. It does seem just like a little bit of a
cool.
maybe Taviran twisting, pattern twisting. Like, how do we give our main characters a chance? Well, the Forsaken were able to get their hands on these ongreal, they'd be toast. So
All right.
it is definitely, I think, one of the bigger plot holes that Jordan kind of just plugged with. They just didn't find it.
All right. Author's prerogative.
But yeah, it's the White Tower storeroom should be raided by the Black Aja, should be given to the Forsaken.
All right. Well, there it is then.
I mean, if Fane could break in by killing one, novice.
Oh my God, seriously. Yeah, I said I need to get with the 90s.
Well, you know what they say, the dream of the 90s is alive in Portland.
They do say that.
And they're referring to Teleron Riyadh when they say that.
Clearly.
The dream, capital D. Yeah.
Definitely exactly what they meant. No question. Chapter 17, Secrets, and our symbol is the Nodding Ravens. I still only have half of my Nodding Ravens fandom tattoo. I still need the other half.
I still have none of my Nodding Ravens tattoo.
We're gonna need to fix that. I know an artist in Corvallis. It's about halfway between us. Field trip. Someday. I see you trying to squirm out of this, but I am patient. I am patient like geology.
Yeah, it's a good thing you don't have anyone that I'm dating on your side.
Mm-hmm.
Because Never wants one of those too. See,
this is what I'm talking about.
She also feeds the ravens around here all the time. She gets them to come to her with the dog. She has dog treats she can feed the ravens. I guess they're crows technically. Those
are very different birds, but also they have the same sort of parasocial relationship with the snack givers.
Right. So she manages, she caws at them and then they come and fly and land on all the power lines around her, and then she throws out the treats and they grab them.
Yeah.
And call back at her. Yeah.
Corvids are a thing. They are a aspect of urban wildlife that's very cool and very trippy.
One of the things when we went to WatCon and we were in Ohio is she's like, I miss the corvid. I miss the crows cawing in the morning. It's some people hear songbirds, we hear crows cawing. That's how you wake up to nature.
Yeah, that harsh call. We've got 2 pairs of ravens that live around here, and then a whole bunch of crows. And sometimes we'll see them fighting in the sky. The ravens will be trying to fly by all nice and sedate, and they'll just be getting absolutely dive bombed by 4 or 5 or more crows. And it's just so much corvid drama out here. But yeah, in the city, you're not going to have ravens so much. You're going to have crows.
Still damn smart, though.
They're super, super smart, particularly when they're living in close concert with humans and navigating cities. It drives them to be smart in ways that we recognize and can interact with.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right. I will read us in, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. So picking up literally where we left off at our last chapter episode. Once Delana was sure that her noxious seed had taken root, She murmured that it might be best if they were not seen arriving back at the camp together, and slipped away, pushing her mare to a quick trot through the snow and leaving the rest of them to ride on in uneasy silence except for the crunch of the horses' hooves. The warders maintained their distance behind, and the escorting soldiers had their attention back on the farms and thickets, without so much as a glance towards the Aes Sedai that Egwene could see, now. Men never knew when to keep their mouths shut, though. Telling a man to be quiet only made him gossip all the harder, just to close friends he could trust, to be sure, as if they in turn would not tell everyone who would listen. The warders might be different. Aes Sedai always insisted they were, those who had warders. But no doubt the soldiers would talk of sisters arguing, and no doubt they would say Delana had been sent off with a flea in her ear. The woman had planned this very carefully. Worse than fireweed or strangler vine could grow if that seed was allowed to sprout. But the Grey Sister had sheltered herself from blame very neatly. Truth almost always did come out in the end, but by the end, truth was often so wrapped around with rumors and speculation and absolute lies that most people never did believe it.
And so that's Delana being kind of pissed off and arguing because they opened talks with the White Tower. Because Delana, as a Black agent, is trying to keep the White Tower and the rebels apart. She doesn't want talks to start.
Well, she wants whatever will stall and protract the rebellion to happen. She actually is instigating the talks being forced to start. That's what her noxious seed is forcing the talks to get initiated. By bringing that topic up and making sure everyone hears that in that circle. It's like, hey, this is happening. You need to deal with it. And so Egwene can't stop it. That's kind of what a lot of these two chapters is about, is Delana has pushed this ball off the cliff and now it's rolling. Can you stop it? No. Let's lean into it and manage it. Not because Delana wants negotiations to happen, but because negotiations draw out the conflict.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, there's a little bit of betrayal there that's hard to tell exactly what Delana's going for versus what she's saying, right?
Right, and plus, you've also got Beonin being completely duplicitous here too, while not being a dark friend, because Beonin does want negotiations to happen, genuinely, and she is negotiating to bring about the reconciliation of the tower, but she's not doing it in the way that everyone thinks she is, because she's actually always been working for Elaida. There's even a comment in these chapters that someone's like, I'm surprised that Beonin didn't just go to Elaida when the split happened, or didn't stay with Elaida when the split happened. And the answer is she did stay with Elaida, and Elaida was so sure of her loyalty that she sent Beonin to be a spy and an agitator and a dissident among you. So Beonin's motivations for the negotiations are just as multi-layered and duplicitous as Delana's, but she's not a dark friend. She has completely different motivations, so it's very hard to tell who's lying about what, when, where in this section. And that's why we're here. Or more accurately, that's why I'm here.
Hey!
And obviously Egwene is confused about Delana's motivations because she's not assuming Black Aja in more than the general sense of she distrusts everyone.
Mm-hmm. Oh, man, I don't have a lot of highlights here for the first couple of pages.
All right, take me to your next highlight.
The longer we sit with nothing happening, the more sisters will start making excuses for Elaida's crimes.
Yeah, I thought that was... There's a lot of comments in this about truth and the durability of lies that just hit very close to home in our modern political context for reasons that should be obvious to the casual observer.
I thought there was a line here, very likely even Black sisters yearn for the tower to be whole again. And I'm like, yes, but their orders might be very different.
Mm-hmm. The part of the sister, that's more the sister and less the Black Aja yearns for the tower. The Black Aja takes precedence over that, though.
Right. Because they're clearly trying to create a break here.
Yeah, and you know, again, Egwene doesn't understand the Black Aja's motivations, so she's ascribing emotions to them that may or may not be true.
And so this is kind of, there's a lot of Aes Sedai here. You got Anya, Carlinia, Myrelle, Nisao, Morvrin. Isn't this basically the Saladar 6? Yeah, it's who she was with last time. So we don't need to go over this retinue again, because like she's in the same motion that she was in our last chapters. Okay. there's this thing about Lord Gareth not being able to find the ships he needs to block the harbors. That's super important because that leads to the creation of the Quendiar chains, which is why she ends up being kidnapped.
Yeah, there's a lot of setting up of the plan to block the harbors because we're hearing here about how they're not going to be able to block the harbors. And then in the next chapter, we hear about who's fastest at making Quendiar. And there's hints at there's a bigger reason than economics for that. We aren't told why yet, but it is tied to the question of the harbors. Those information bits are meant to go together.
Right, and those big chains keep coming up, and the Quendiar keeps coming up, and the fact that they have to move the chains to let the ships in, and yes, it blocks the harbor, but only temporarily, and yeah, it's all leading up to what if they can't move the chains? What if they are Quendiar?
Yeah, which begs the question of what they're planning on doing with Quendiar chains after the siege is over. Seems like a very short-sighted plan.
I mean, we do see them, like, chiseling them out.
Yeah, literally dismantling ancient stoneworks from the founding of the tower in order to deal with this stupid scar from this petty move during this dumbass rebellion. It just feels so short-sighted. It's like, we saved the city by bombing it to pieces, you know?
Right, yeah, we starved it out, so now there's nobody, like, it's such in bad shape that nobody wants it anymore. So now it's ours. Yay.
So it's like, I get why it worked, but it does beg the question of what the fuck Tar-Valon is supposed to do long term with this as a strategy. But Egwene's job is not to preserve the tower in infrastructure. Her job is to preserve the tower psychospiritually. So I guess it's fine because main character.
Yeah, speaking of which, she could remember not thinking that way, but it was part of the Innkeeper's daughter she had been obliged to leave behind. This was another world with very different rules from Emond's Field. And there's a little bit of just like, we have lost the Egwene who was always going to support Rand no matter what. Like, this Egwene is the Amyrlin seat first and a Two Rivers woman second.
Which is how the ritual is literally written. You are washed clean of Egwene Alvir of Emond's Field. You are bound to us now.
It always makes me a little sad. I always wanted Egwene, and I think that's one of the reasons why Egwene gets a lot of hate, is that there's this idea of, like, why didn't Egwene use her power to support the people of her village instead of supporting these foreign Aes Sedai? And I'm like, well, you have to go back to her original plotline. She always wanted to leave the Two Rivers. She's always wanted to explore. She always wanted to be more. She's not a Nynaeve. She didn't leave the Two Rivers to support and protect the boys. She saw an opportunity to get out and happened to be going along with the boys because they were her ticket out.
Mm-hmm. And all of them talk about how they've changed. Well, Matt denies that he's changed, but Perrin and Rand, at separate points, Rand much more poignantly early on, you know, he thinks of a shepherd called Rand al'Thor, right? And Perrin has a similar revelation, albeit under Sanderson's pen. But it's same idea of, like, I've changed. Who I was is like a memory. It's not who I am now. And Matt, for all of his protestations of it, clearly goes through a similar process too. It's just not sad with him because he's in denial about it.
Yeah. With Matt, the more he says he hasn't done something, the more likely it is that he has. And him denying that he's changed is absolutely him pointing out that he's changed a lot.
But yeah, I mean, Egwene ran towards it and the others didn't. And so
I also feel like she's had to deal with some of the worst trauma, right? I mean, except maybe for Rand. She's dealt with probably the worst physical, emotional trauma of being a slave, being kidnapped, just what the wise ones did to her was almost as, you know, that kind of school would break most of us. Yeah. I would call it torture. You know, it's basically torture as well. It's not, it's academic torture. It's yeah,
special
exactly.
Forces training.
Right. It breaks most people, you know? So the fact that she survived all of that and is where she is today in charge of what was arguably the most powerful institution in the world is kind of amazing, you know, but she is different. And I think it can be sad. because she's not Egwene anymore. None of the characters are the Two Rivers characters anymore.
But Egwene ran the most aggressively towards it and has suffered the most along the way. And that adds a layer. It's the kind of sad that you get from that Remember a Shepherd Called Randall Thor, but it's a much longer sine wave to get to that gut punch, right? It's not quite as eloquently summed up in a single battle scene. It's like her whole arc with the Eyes to Die turning her into the Amerlin. But it hits in that same kind of like, but we liked you, you know?
And I think, we talked about, I think early on, I talked a lot about how, these characters go from farmer to king to emperor to leader, and what we're seeing here is she's really in the emperor stage, but she's in the last battle, she'll become a real leader.
I think she becomes a leader during the Shanshan attack, like right before, basically her confrontation from Elida onward. I think that's when she passes through into her final, like, exalted leader form. And then she gets even more exalted +1 during the last battle. Because, fucking hell, when she defends the tower from the Shanshan and then from Masana, like, she just steps into her power so tremendously. Compared to now, where she's still forcing people to her will, she just, she levels up so good.
And I think that's the difference between what I call the emperor stage and the leader stage, right? You got, Rand says the same way. There's a period of time where he's forcing everybody to do what he wants. And he, holds threats or power or, he is powerful, so do what he wants or else type situations. And then when he becomes leader, he's just leading and people want to follow him. And Egwene hits the same thing, as right now she's still forcing the Hall to do what she wants. But then when she sort of becomes elevated to the true Amerlin of both united halves of the tower, she doesn't have to force them anymore. They just want to do what she wants.
So we get some more foreshadowing about how important it is that Beonin ultimately does give traveling to the Shanshan.
Yes. Yeah, through Elida.
A lot of emphasis on that secret and how it needs to not get to the tower. And Beonin is how that happens. So, boo, Beonin, boo.
That must be one secret you hold as tightly as you hold the secret of our ferrets in the tower. Not knowing that the secret of the ferrets in the tower has already been spilled.
Not to Elida. Oh, no, yeah, to Elida. To Elida?
Yeah, that's to Elida. Yep.
But not from Beonin. Beonin's not responsible for that.
No, it's not Beonin's fault for that one, but it has been spilled. There is no... It's like, yeah, she is going to hold that secret just as close as the other one because the other one's been spilled already.
Well, yeah. But, I mean, she doesn't spill it because of that. She actually spills it because that's how she knows she's going to get into Elida's good graces. It's just a tongue-in-cheek thing by the author. It's not actually in her motivations. And she is literally a ferret in reverse. That's a very good point, Super Skylake. She's literally, there's a 10 to 1 ferret ratio, but she is literally a ferret.
She is the other ferrets, the ferret in the hall. She's the rat in the hall. So the next page or two is sort of like about Beonin.
Yeah, she gives great instructions. You can talk about anything but agree to nothing. It's a very productive strategy that will keep the talks absolutely stuck at square one for the entire arc of this plot. Right.
It's basically saying these talks are a delaying tactic. I want no results to come of them.
And both sides want that. Elida keeps trying to stop them. It's just an entire red herring for everyone.
But sometimes politics are like that. And sometimes something does come out of the talks, even when nobody wants it to, which is why you hold them in the first place.
Yeah, which is why Egwene's like, whatever we got to do to stretch this out and win this fight, we'll do, even if it means engaging in absolutely pointless talks that nobody wants, that nobody thinks will lead anywhere.
I like this line. Without Shiriam and the rest, resistance to Elida would have fallen apart before it ever had a chance to coalesce. I'm like, yeah, the whole rebellion is a dark friend plot. It's one of my favorite things about the fact that it's so unlikely that Egwene would ever rise to power in this situation, right? And it's like, well, yeah, of course, because the rebellion would have fallen apart a long time ago if Dark Friends hadn't been propping it up.
Right, because...
On both sides.
Yeah, there is a secret cabal that takes up almost a third of the entirety of the Aes Sedai, quote-unquote, government of the world. And there's a secret cabal of them who did a coup and are in charge and are actually playing both sides of the board across the entire thing, sock puppet style, basically. It's very frustrating.
Well, and I also love the parallels. Egwene has Romaine that she's using, right? Ramonda and Lelaine. She's keeping them fighting in order to hold power. That's the exact Dark Friend strategy. Except they've got Elida and Egwene fighting each other so that they can, steer the halls, the two halls into whatever location they want them.
There's a dream she has early on about endless series of marionettes going up into the clouds, just marionette strings and marionette strings, and she can't even see where they lead. And it's an early vision, and you think it's all just about stuff happening to Rand, early book stuff. But, it's very true of her arc, because, in the dream, she can't see where it leads, and I feel like that dream is relevant here, too.
Yeah, very relevant here, definitely. I noticed that they're halfway between Tarvalon and Dragonmount, so... we know Dragonmount is just barely visible from Tarvalon.
It's extremely visible from Tarvalon. It dominates the skyline from Tarvalon.
Oh.
I was actually surprised to read that. I thought that the distance was greater, that camping near the island wouldn't put you halfway to the mountain. The way that gets described, because the camp, I believe, is described in Gawain's POV as being about a mile in diameter. So that suggests that it's a couple miles between the island and the mountain, and that seems way too close.
Right.
I feel like in New Spring,
maybe between the base of it where it starts.
Yeah, because I feel like in New Spring, when Swan and Moraine are being sent out, the mountain is being described as a day or three's ride from the gates.
Right. I thought it was pretty far away.
Yeah. So, the mountain is right there in terms of mountains, but it's not, literally a stone's throw away.
Maybe it's like Mount Hood here in Portland, right?
Right, which, you wouldn't say that Portland is halfway between the river and the mountain. They're close, but it's not, that close. Now I want to look at my map, which is up on the wall.
It is. It's hard to really... that's a very objective... Where does the mountain... Are we talking halfway between the peak of the mountain? Are we talking halfway between the first base of the mountain? That seems a very arbitrary statement.
Well, and okay, let's return to my geology lecture. Dragonmount, when it gets formed by Lews Theron's magic laser beam of sadness, it is in a flat plain, and it pushes the river to the side. So clearly, the river is close enough to get affected by the uplift of the mountain.
Right.
When it comes into existence, but also it doesn't come into existence it doesn't have normal foothills, like a normal mountain, because of how it came into existence. I think it gets described... Oh, here's okay, geometry. It's described as the shadow of Dragonmount just barely reaching the island of Tarvalon at sunset or sunrise at some point. The shadow almost perfectly goes that distance.
Sure, and the shadow is going to be way further than the height.
Right. Curve of the earth and distance and stuff. But that gives you an idea of how far away it is, right? If it was right there, 2 miles away, it would be absolutely swallowed in Dragonmount's shadow, all the time.
Sure.
But it's not. It's the shadow barely reaches to the island. So it's got to be, a day or more's ride away.
And we know it's taller than most mountains, right? This is Everest, above Everest
this is
in terms of
far
height.
too thin of air to breathe. I would assume it's roughly Everest height, because only serious badasses can breathe up there, and even then not for that long. Roughly speaking, Everest height. But yeah, it is stupid tall to be all by itself in a plane.
Okay, so if I take an object height and I plug it of 8,848 feet and plug that into a shadow calculator.
This is the nerddom that the people pay for. I love you, chat. You're ridiculous.
All right. The length of shadow to your height is proportional to 1 over the tangent of the sun's altitude. If the sun is low in the sky, about 10 degrees, your shadow would be 5.6 times as long as your height. Okay, so that gives us a pretty good estimate, right? So, assuming Dragonmount is about the height of Everest, maybe a little bit taller, just to make the math easier, say 10,000 feet. When the sun is low in the sky, you're going to be 5 times that length. 10,000 times 5, 50,000 feet away.
So that's 5 miles-ish?
It's about 10 miles.
Okay, yeah, that's a day or 3 ride, depending on conditions.
So I think we can say from that the mount is probably around it, but that's to the peak again, right? If you're talking about the slopes of Dragonmount, that's going to be even closer. Yes,
the slopes are going to be closer by virtue of how cones are shaped.
By virtue of how cones are shaped. Yeah. Okay. So right, that was a long tangent to be like, yes, they are probably 5 miles outside the city.
Yeah, okay. So that's what we're saying is it's a couple miles between the camp and the city, and then not that many more miles past the camp to get to the slopes of Dragonmount. Okay.
And, it could be a day or 3 if you hit traffic in Tarvalon, that 5 o'clock donkey traffic you got to watch out for. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Really going to slow you down.
And Zool is saying that 30 miles in a day is an okay day's ride. Yeah, but there's also the whole sitting down and taking people's names for hours that they had to calculate into it, so, it just is a cone. It's a stratovolcano. They're cone-shaped. They're not pyramid-shaped.
Well, and it certainly was formed differently because it was formed by, I wonder if the amount of energy imparted from that beam of light going down to the surface causes some uplift around it, right? Because you could say that was an impact from above, and you could sort of see ripples coming out from that.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I assume that the effect is akin to balefire in the sense that he's just vaporizing the rock rather than impacting with an object. But, I don't know. It could have been a fireball and had a kinetic impact as it landed. That's totally possible. And certainly as the magma came up, it was doing a lot of elbowing the crust aside that would have created uplift and slopes and almost foothills as the actual funnel vent did its thing. You would have had a lot of the ground breaking and rising around it too. Most of that would have ended up being swallowed by volcanic debris, but it would have helped create that big profile cone instead of just a weird sideways fountain. It's not like a frozen fountain in a park. It's a proper, beautiful cone. And that, in large part, I think has to do with the ground under it buckling upwards, just as all that magma depressurizes and tries to rise.
Because isn't there a fair amount of gas caught in that as well? So as it rises, that gas expands, causing...
Very much so.
Extreme expand. That's the feedback loop you get of as it rises, you lose pressure, dissolved gas comes out, and you get depressurized. Essentially you have a fizzy drink under the Earth's crust, and you shake it up and open it up, and you get the same thing you get when you shake up a Coke.
Yeah, basically. And Luz Theron picked the middle of a continent to do that, so it was extremely explosive rock that he was melting. That was deep in the middle of a continent. He did not bore down to the mantle, I think he definitely was staying within the tectonic plate, so he was picking a very, very prone to explosion form of rock. It would have been an extremely loud time while Dragonmount was forming. Would have been very, very loud with exploding gases.
Dragonmount and Tarvalon. We're talking a little bit about the strategy. They're holding the bridges to keep people from going in and out of Tarvalon, but it doesn't really matter because they haven't blocked the harbor yet.
We get an old saying among Aes Sedai, a warder at his ease and a lion resting on a hill, ... It just kind of trails off, but you can fill in the blank.
Dangerous at any moment. I'd love to hear what people's ideas of what the rest of it goes for. Could spring into action at any moment. Look calm, but could be dangerous. That sort of thing.
I always figured it was, I kind of paired it with Tuon, thinking about Matt being a lion on the high plains versus in a cave.
Right.
He was in Abu Dar. I kind of paired those things together to be when a lion is in their natural environment, commanding the high ground. There's sunset. There's a nice breeze coming up into the main. Like, there's just nothing more content, but also able to spring into action and rip your face off. Right? I don't know if that's how everyone else interpreted it, but that's how I interpreted it.
I can buy that.
It's kind of a big, long discussion about how the eyes and ears ecosystem is going and how the world sees Aes Sedai and how Aes Sedai see the world, and lots of world building. I don't know how much. Oh, there is one line I want to point out. The world saw Aes Sedai as a monolith. The sisters themselves were little more than a convocation of hermits. I am feeling seen.
Like
our
that,
fandom
yeah.
is seen. We are a convocation of hermits.
The one I wanted to talk about was, again, we've got this corruption going on, right? Baskets of meal and grain had to be disposed of. Half the barrels of salt and beef open for use stank, so there's nothing to be done except bury them. Like, they have a real problem right now with corruption, meat, rotting. You know, the Dark One is touching the world. And we're just going to see that in every POV, no matter who they are. The powers of the Keeping can't stop it. Although Keeping did occur to me, I was like, that would be really useful for like space travel.
Definitely.
So you could like put a Keeping on all your food and just like
on all your colonists. Just that's your deep sleep. Just put a Keeping on them.
Oh yeah, but that's a good point. It's like a stasis box, basically.
Basically, yeah, exactly. But we're hitting the point in the story where it is as though Saidar itself is failing. And that will become much more pronounced as we slide towards the last battle. This is becoming annoying in how frequent it's getting mentioned, and it's only going to happen more often.
Oh, I wanted to talk about this line. She could only pray they lasted long enough. Pray and shore up as hard as she could. Who is she praying to?
The light. The creator.
The creator. The pattern.
It's so funny how he built a world without religion, and yet sometimes these little linguistic idioms are able to get in there and just make you go, what?
Isn't that... Wait, there's no religion.
Like, Elaine, sends up a prayer a couple of times, too, and it's like, to who?
Yeah. To
who taught you how to pray? What does a prayer look like? And we've got, death prayers, but death is easy. This sort of thing is, very much like, I feel like you didn't completely scrub religion out, even though you almost did. There's just a couple of weird spots that didn't buff out all the way. I don't know.
And I think that's just the culture we're in, right? Like, we pray, and we, that's saying something. That's a method of looking up and going, please.
Acknowledging that there's a bigger force than you. Right.
And there is a light, there is a creator. Prayer is something that could exist outside of a religion. But yeah, it feels like a little bit of an idiom to me, where I'm just like, I don't know if this is the right in-world expression. Right.
It's like hope would make more sense, but I get he wants something more strong than that. But yeah, I mean, there's no religious narrative that says prayers will be answered.
Right. The wheel wills, weaves as the wheel wills is the opposite of prayers being answered.
Right. So it feels a little anachronistic. And yeah, it would be nice if there was a word that expressed divine levels of hope in like the overall tapestry of fate that didn't feel like it came out of a church. Because it just hits wrong. But I feel like he needed hope with sparkles on top, Hope with sparkles.
Hope with sparkles. I like that. That's prayer.
Yes, this is what our atheist ancestors
that's
understanding
what I'm
prayer
from
to
now
be.
on. Hope with sparkles.
Hope with sparkles.
We get a talk about the families of the novices, because we've got a ton of novices. More since before the Trolloc Wars, because they're actually recruiting, like we've been yelling at them to do since we started talking about the series.
Yeah. It's notable that it has been since the Trolloc Wars, which is when the Black Aja was established. The number of Aes Sedai has been going down explicitly since that moment, and Egwene, despite the Black Aja being instrumental to her rise, Egwene is reversing one of the oldest cons that they've had going.
And of course the families, which we know were organized by that
Sharina
older
Malloy.
novice, Sharina Malloy, the most powerful
We get a lot about her in this doubleheader of chapters. We get a lot about what she's done for the Aes Sedai or what she's done for the novices and the accepted, and how that's bothering the Aes Sedai. And we get more with her later with Swan, which is really interesting. But this is definitely a chapter that gives us a lot of what's happening with Sharina. She is really making her moves to become Amerlin in 200 or so years.
The next thing I want to talk about, neither Phaedrine nor Shimari was strong enough to weave a gateway by herself, but linked, she thought they could just manage to weave one big enough to walk through. Heads close together, deep in conversation. Strangely, they were just pinning on their cloaks. So these two browns have come from somewhere warm or somewhere inside, traveling together. I couldn't find anything on where they may have been, where they may have gone, what they were doing, who these characters even are. This is the only mention we get of them. And I was just wondering, is this just, like, it's not the only mention, but it is just weird that these characters are given this sort of paragraph of intrigue with no further clues.
Red herring. It can't all be meaningful when you're writing books this long and have this many characters. He just wanted to have some random extras wander through for some reason. Like, I'm assuming that it's just Brown Aja doing Brown Aja stuff, working on some research project that has nothing to do with the last battle and won't actually be done until the Fourth Age and yada yada academic stuff. That's my headcanon.
Yeah, because Shimari's only ever mentioned in this chapter. Phaedrine was mentioned in Fires of Heaven, where she meets Nynaeve and Elaine when they arrive at Saladar and hustles them to Shiriam, right? So that's the person who is like, shh, don't say anything. I'm get you to Shiriam, right? No significance. No mention of two Browns doing anything or anything like that. So, yeah.
Genuine misdirection from Jordan. So we get more thoughts based on that about how just one sister returning to the tower with knowledge of traveling would really, really suck. And there's nothing to do about it. There's no way to stop it from happening. It's inevitable. And then she's going to get captured by the Shan-Chan, and that's super inevitable, and it's bad.
A little bit of foreshadowing there. Just a little bit.
Skosh.
Just a tiny bit. The next thing I have is her arriving in the tent where they are making Quendiar.
Yeah, so I don't know why I thought she got to her tent before. Oh, right, she's heading to her tent. She doesn't get to her tent. She fucking sidetracks and looks at a bunch of people, and then, ends up at this tent, which is not her tent. It's a different tent. This is the tent where the Quendiar workshop is.
You've got Leanne. So who's in this tent? We've got
Bodwin and Nicola are in there, as well as Sharina and Tiana, and a couple of other Aes Sedai. Janya and Karen are also in there weaving. And all of this is ostensibly to make Terangrial items for sale, or not Terangrial, to make Quendiar items for sale, but it's actually to screen sisters for who's going to be fast enough at the weave to turn the harbor chain into Quendiar in a single motion.
And none of them are even close.
No, Bodwin is almost kind of sort of promising, and then Egwene is like, no, I can't let you do it, because Lyanna is the only other one who has any speed with it. Egwene can do it basically instantly. Lyanna is fast, but noticeable. It takes time. Bodwin is it's fine for craft work, but it's not going to work for the siege.
Because remember, talent in Earth is exceedingly rare. Egwene is one of the few people we've known, females, that has actually had ability with the One Power and Earth. But yeah, that's why she's so good at it. Yeah,
it's very fortunate for the way that this all plays out that she happens to have that particular aptitude.
Because we saw that back when she was in the Shan-Chan, right? She was able to find the mine.
Right, and it's a big deal because women are very rarely talented with Earth, and yeah.
And so that's why she's able to make the Quendiar so easily. There's a line here, it was harder to make a novice go slowly when you could not point out that she risked ending her quest for the shawl by burning herself out and losing the One Power forever. So right, the healing has become famous. However, I think if you burn yourself out, you can't necessarily be healed. right? We see that later with
Satala.
Oh, she who is no longer Satala Anan, yeah, because I think they try and heal her, but the burnout, basically, there's that bridge, right? And if the bridge is severed, you can stitch it back together because it's a clean cut. But when you're burned out, it's basically blown up, and it's a lot harder to fill in that bridge because it's a much bigger gap. So it seems like the severing of the surgical severing that happens from a punishment is different than burning yourself out.
Yeah, I feel like I also read someone in some Discord, one of the many Discords I'm in, someone said that, or was hypothesizing that maybe also the distance in time since you get burned out might make a difference. Like you can get healed within the first few years, but if it goes for decades, like maybe you heal around it or it gets too attenuated, it withers away.
Well, and we see that with a lot of Aes Sedai healing. If something scars for too long, it can't really be healed.
Exactly.
So I think the same can probably be said for a severing.
Yeah. I was just checking in my book to see, in my companion, to see if Letis Muro Aes Sedai was anything other than a random extra. And no, she only shows up here and adds a little character to a scene and then never shows up again. So we get a mention of Swan's puzzle of the two young sitters. We get mention of it here, and then also in the next chapter it gets expounded on more, but this is basically the moment in the story where Egwene accepts that Swan has found a pattern that needs to be investigated. She's no longer in doubt about the two young sitter pattern.
And there's a whole discussion about it, but like basically it's a coincidence. It's sitters assuming that the tower is going to get back together, and so putting a bunch of inexperienced people in spots so they would be the one who would have to step down when the tower is reunited.
Yeah, it's a big old nothing burger as far as we're concerned, but it obviously makes sense for them in world to care about it, but it's a nothing burger.
Right. And I think that Jordan was putting a lot of that in these chapters of like, this is just a big complex world and not everything has meaning.
Yeah, exactly.
Or the meaning doesn't have to be important.
Sometimes the curtains are just blue, but we are going to describe them in loving
Sometimes the dress
detail.
is just green.
Yeah.
So a lot of complaining about the novices doing the weaving and the Quendiar, a lot of discussion there.
Oh, we shouldn't make things for sale. It's so plebeian.
And I'm like, I'd be more worried about bringing down the overall value of Quendiar if you make too much of it. But
well, that does get mentioned also, that they might crash the market entirely.
But they're not making enough for that to really
No,
make a
if they
difference.
ever get the tower back together and make this a real industry, that will be a problem eventually, but they're in no danger of it currently. And yeah, Egwene thinks about how she actually discovered this with just a little bit of hints from Mogadine, so that's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Then we've got discussion about how Bodwin has decided to braid her hair, even though she probably didn't get permission. So kind of like how Egwene got permission and then immediately unbraided her hair when she went to the tower. It seems like Bodwin has decided to go the other way and add the braid to her look because she is a woman by virtue of having gone away to do this thing. But it's not a big deal.
Yeah, it's just nice to know, like, hey, here's Matt's sister also being novice, right? Like...
Right, and like also reflecting on how Egwene has changed, because like there's this whole distance between them, and they can't talk, and they can't be friends, and more emphasizing how different Egwene has become over the course of the books.
Right. Because like, I bet Bodwin she doesn't understand why they can't be friends. She doesn't get it. And Egwene's like, well, it's obvious, right? Duh. You know, and that's the difference between them at this point, is like, the one who thinks it's obvious they can't be friends, and the one who thinks it's obvious they still should be. And I think, and I'll say it again, one of the things I think drives people nuts about Egwene is the lack of loyalty to the Two Rivers folks. And here you kind of see it. You see it. She's much more concerned about being Amyrlin and the Amyrlin seat and the White Tower than Bodwin, Matt's sister. Right.
Which she has to be in order to wrangle all these asshole women who don't even deserve her time.
Mm-hmm. Fair.
It's so frustrating. Yeah, and so then we get this whole thing about Nicola and how she's being disobedient, and Irena's hanging around her, and she causes problems, and she's not gonna be able to get to the shawl, but we need her to get to the shawl because she's so strong. And it's all just sad when you know how she dies. Like, she actually is on a good redemption arc, and then she just reaches a little too far and flies a little too close to the sun while trying to support Egwene. And it's just like, man, Nicola, if you could just calm down. But she won't. She can't. She does not have the capacity to do anything less than 110%.
And she takes her friend with her.
Yes, her definitely not dating friend.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Partner.
Yeah, they
say.
are absolutely two peas in a pod together.
And yeah, she seems to be the, like, you know how they always say, like, if you go too far, you'll eventually pay for it. Like, she seems to be the example that Jordan wanted to show us of someone trying too hard and going too far and paying for it without the protection of being a main character.
Yeah, she fucks around like she's a main character, and she finds out like she's an extra.
Yeah. Yeah, the fact that she foretells, but Ariana's always there to hear and remember and help her interpret.
Mm-hmm. And yet the funny part is she is actually foretelling, and if she could be a little more humble and calm about it, she might be helping the Aes Sedai navigate things.
Right. And so here's actually a little bit, something we haven't talked about in a long time, a series of what I think are legitimate foretellings. Battles with the Shan-Chan or the Ashaman, obviously, right, are coming. And some of these are obvious, but some of them, take heed. The Amyrlin imprisoned, that could be Elaida imprisoned by the Shan-Chan, that could also be Egwene imprisoned by Elaida.
I assumed that was what it was, but either works.
Right. Yeah, but I think because she's saying the Amyrlin and Egwene is her Amyrlin, it is Egwene imprisoned by Elaida. But
yeah,
it could also be Elaida imprisoned by the Shan-Chan. That could be an interpretation of it.
Because it could be an allegorical Amyrlin, and she doesn't know which one it is. So, and it matters that Elaida gets captured again with the traveling for the Shan-Chan. Like, an Amyrlin imprisoned has profound implications either way.
For the intelligence they can pull out of her. The Dragon Reborn doing 9 impossible things. I thought that was one of the most interesting because, like, you know, we see him growing trees. We see him, you know, essentially making grain healthy again. He
unspoils food wherever he goes. He basically cures people magically by laying on of hands. Technically, it's just healing, but yeah, the whole making trees grow and food unspoil is 2 impossible things. He saves Maradon basically by himself. That's basically an impossible thing.
Cleansing Saidin.
Nynaeve heals madness. He doesn't do that. But yeah, 9 impossible things definitely feels like it's actually a reference to what he's doing.
Having 3 wives. Totally, yeah.
Body swapping. Ridiculous. Lighting the pipe.
Yep, that's an impossible thing, totally.
So yeah, I definitely think that he does actually do 9 impossible things, and we probably could count up 9 miracles that he performs that are, like, found in sources elsewhere that represent various deities going on their arcs.
Healing himself for madness?
Yeah, I mean, having the revelation on top of Dragonmount, having veins of gold, is definitely feels like an impossible thing.
Margot, only 9? That's really, yeah. Just 9 before breakfast. And visions that might be Tarmangaiden or Biliabus' stomach.
Which she's definitely describing the sky in Talairan Riyadh that's swirling over Tarmangaiden.
Oh, sure. I think also over the actual last battle. The clouds get all crazy, yeah.
Well, so. I mean, they become one and the same during the end, so.
Right. But yeah, I like this. I like that everyone's like, oh, that Nicola having all these crazy foretellings that she's making up. And it's like, no, these are all probably 100% accurate if they were just interpreted correctly. In the same way that nobody believed that you were a dreamer, like, and isn't taking your dream seriously. Like, take Nicola's prophecies seriously. I don't understand why she dismisses them so easily. Just because she doesn't like Nicola?
Yeah, I think that has a lot to do with it. Nicola's very hard to like or take seriously. But that doesn't make her any less right when there's magic prophecy involved.
Or ambitious. I just want to see a gateway.
Yeah. Yeah, she's problematic in so many strategic ways, but her prophecy is good.
The next thing I have is a discussion of Sharina. and how she has potential, was nothing short of remarkable, far beyond anyone in living memory except for Nynaeve, and ahead of Nynaeve as well. So that, again, puts us, third person now who's stronger than Nynaeve that we know of?
Let Nynaeve have something. I'm begging you.
Some thought she might become as strong as it was possible to be, although that was only speculation.
Yeah, because I don't believe there is such a thing.
Right.
No, if you're in a world where channeling just keeps being a thing, there's no such thing as an upper limit. Like, being the creator is the upper limit.
Although Jordan did put hard limits on how the levels, wow. So maybe there is a I know. I think of it more as a natural distribution, and the stronger you are, the more unlikely you are. But enough people, eventually, you get somebody strong enough. Yeah. That tail.
Yeah, exactly.
A probability. Yeah. I also think Sharina is going to de-age quite a bit as she starts to channel. Like, she's described as this grandmother, but she's not that much older than some of the Aes Sedai. I mean, some of the Aes Sedai are quite a bit older than she is.
But yeah, no, when Swan talks to her in a later book, she wonders if Sharina's crow's feet are starting to vanish. Like, she seems more youthful.
Yeah.
And yeah, I agree. I think that using the power like she is going to age her down to, like, a nice middle age, nothing's broken, nothing's hurting, like, midpoint. Like, she's going to get put into whatever the power considers proper stasis age.
Right. De-age her. Well, because she's what?
Yeah, something
80?
like that.
And being as powerful as she could be, right? We've seen other Aes Sedai live to be, potentially 600. Other channelers live to be 600. And if she's even more powerful than that, let's say 700, well, 1/7 of her overall age is still, like, I bet she's going to look like she's in her 20s.
But with eyes that have definitely seen more than a 20-year-old's, like, honestly, come by even.
A lot more than that, yeah.
Yeah,
right?
Sharina's really interesting because she walks into the Aes Sedai world with so much more lived experience, which is ironic to say to women who live centuries, but, like, she's the one who organizes families out of disgust at seeing everyone running around like a chicken with their head cut off. Like, she's done this. She has real lived experience in the actual world that the Aes Sedai institutionally lack, and, like, she can't help but improve things by virtue of being there. And it's so interesting to me that the Aes Sedai have managed to never come across someone like her, or they've managed to avoid people like her this whole time.
Well, because they've created their ivory tower. All the novices are very young teenagers, if they're even that old. And everybody else has been in the tower since they were young teenagers. So if you don't experience it in the tower, you don't experience it anywhere from other than from a privileged perspective of being Aes Sedai.
We get one more thought of Egwene thinking about how different she is, because she's like, oh, it's too bad I didn't let Swan kill these bitches. Just to drive that nail in the coffin home. We are not in Egwene's Kansas anymore.
No. The Egwene from Two Rivers would be shocked to hear the Egwene from the White Tower think that way.
Yeah, but that's where she's at. And I mean, she catches herself. She never becomes that ruthless, but just, to really drive home how transformative these books have been for her. Yeah, and then we talk to Chiron, who gets just a paragraph to remind us about how sometimes missions fall apart through no fault of your own, because the Dragon Reborn fucked everyone else over.
What had you been sent off to do? What was her important mission? Do you remember?
She was sent off to find Rand in the Waste, right? Wasn't she part of that?
The Saladar send her as an embassy to Rand, right? But they go to Camelin.
Oh, she goes with the mission that takes Min to visit him.
And then they encounter the Two Rivers girls brought by Varen and end up bringing them back to Saladar.
Right. Yeah, Chiron's just been tugged along by events beyond her control, and she's a little bit cranky about Egwene telling her what to do. Because
when she left Saladar, Egwene had just been a novice that had gone off with Suian, right? And now she's back and she's the Emerald Seat. What the hell? Like, that change was very sudden for her, is the point that he's making. Yeah.
Yeah. And also, Chiron is actually going to die shortly because she's actually the one who's going to pair up with Liana to do the Quendiar thing. Chiron and Liana are the two Aes Sedai who are good enough to be on the roster for this. And then Halima kills Chiron. Egwene moves Bodwin up the roster, and then at the last minute is like, no, fuck it, I can't do that. I got to pull you out and put myself in instead. But Chiron has to die in order for that to happen. So Chiron, who we're seeing here, her death directly leads to Egwene being captured in the tower.
Do you think that's Halima's goal, or do you think she's just doing it to draw out the siege a little bit longer?
Oh, yeah, I don't think she has any intention of getting Egwene in trouble. I think she's just trying to thwart the siege becoming any more effective.
Because Egwene really makes that decision last minute and on her own.
Yeah. That was a completely unexpected side effect of what happened, but it is directly the result of Chiron getting taken out of the picture.
Because Halima wants Egwene to stay with her because she wants her under her thumb.
Right. She doesn't want the siege to do anything other than fizzle away. She doesn't want it to actually effectively freak out the people in the tower. But yeah, that's where the chapter ends, and then we can just turn the page and go right into a chat with Swan, because literally it's just
a continuation of the previous chapter. Yeah.
And Egwene's thinking about how her name is going to be replacing Sorila Bagans for being the byword for scary Amerlins, because she's so cranky about all the things that her reputation's going to be so scary. And no, Egwene, your reputation's going to be that you were the most badass Aes Sedai that ever flashed to the Amerlin seat for like an entire 6 months before burning out in the biggest blast of flame. You are the flame of Tarvalin, Egwene. That is what you will be remembered for, as being the literal flame of Tarvalin. Your crankiness in this moment will pale in comparison to that time you saved the world.
And our symbol on this one is the Forsaken Snake, as I call it, because I think it's just referencing Halima is in the room.
Yeah.
That's like that 4-clover, 4-leaf, whatever you want to call it, snake, I think is just almost always associated with Forsaken or sometimes Dark Friends.
But because there's so much Halima stuff happening here, I think it is specifically pointing at her. And it's very appropriate because she's just the snake in the grass, like right there with her boobs and her headaches. And yeah. Jesus, why do we do double headers? It's just twice as long of episodes.
Because there's not a lot in there.
I'm looking at an hour 35 minutes on my recording counter.
Yeah, but a lot of that is silence.
True. And I have such a cool tool that's just
that's gonna cut down to like an hour.
Our recording we did yesterday, our secret recording about all the things. I think it was like 7 minutes of silence came out. Because I always check to see how much. And sometimes it's literally like a minute. Like we just were talking the whole time.
Yeah, sometimes it's not much.
7.5 minutes. It's just like, damn, there was a lot of silence there.
We watched the trailer at least twice, and it's a 2 or 3 minute trailer. So that's like 5 minutes of silence right there.
That's what it is. I've done like one technical break where we were just silent because we were. But yeah, it's the best little tool.
I like the Forsaken as the name for this symbol. Fantastic. Danny at the wheel weaves.
I thought that it was an Allie coinage, but Allie and Danny are good friends as they first time their way through things, so I'm not surprised that...
Also, could they like have any more similar names? Jesus, Jordan, really? Allie and Danny? Just ending them both with an I, single syllable? I really wish Jordan would come up with more diverse names. Wait a minute, these are real people, damn it!
It's not the actual reality.
Wait, he's not the creator?
Bella's the creator.
Whatever. She's dead horse. And you can stop beating that dead horse. Alright, you want to dig into this chapter? See, I thought this one had more interesting stuff in it than the previous one. I thought the previous one was just a lot of sitting around. This one at least has
I don't want to do it. It's going to take forever.
Ah.
Alright. Oh, I'm back. We're good. We actually are going to get to Egwene's tent. She's been heading to this tent for like 4 chapters.
3-4 chapters? Yeah.
But she gets there, and Swan is there, and Halima is there, and sparks are flying.
Well, because Halima, of course, is acting like a very spoiled brat, is what the best way I would describe it, right? Halima gets whatever they want.
Yeah, and she's not getting it this time in a way that is unexpected, and it makes her very cranky. Egwene gets a monster of a headache from Halima.
Which is, of course, something she triggers, right? That's the male half of her channeling. It seems like a pretty lazy way of controlling behavior, but maybe that's all that Osangar ever had the ability to do.
I feel like this is very in line with Osangar's very narrow skill set. To be like, I can turn a pain weave on simmer and leave it. And that's it. Like, that's my extent with compulsion, you know? It really seems like Agenor would never have developed this as a skill. Like, sure, you can make pain happen, but that's just like falling out of bed. Like, actual skill with it takes caring about more than doing genetic experiments.
Well, this isn't the one who's doing genetic experiments. No, this is Bethamel.
What was Balthamel's profession before?
As far as I can tell, sadist.
That's Semirog. Oh, right. He was like just like a pickup artist, kind of.
Just S&M, sexual, yeah, like a sexual violence type person was all he was really into.
That's not a career. What was his career? Like there was like stockbroker, like... Oh, no, but there's a bunch of stuff about like the gambling tables and impressing women and stuff. So it is kind of like he was like a professional gambler, pickup artist with really uncomfortable tastes. Professional lecher. Oh, no, a historian. That's what it was. It was I understand primitive cultures like nobody else. That's that character.
Yes. He was fond of women and gambling, cheating in the later in order to impress the former. Lured by the promise of endless life, the historian was easily swayed to join the shadow. He just seems like a skull. He's like your worst history teacher who just like hits on all the girls in his class and like gambles and cheats in his free time, and yet has tenure so nobody can touch him.
Right. So yeah, like, okay. So still not necessarily the kind of person who developed his talents with the power, just
a little bit of like pain and pleasure stuff.
Right. And like thinks that people are so simple, particularly women. I'm not surprised at all that a former cheating pickup artist type dude would completely underestimate Egwene. You know, a teenage young woman. Like, of course he's going to look down at her and be like, okay, sweetheart, don't you worry. Like that nasty misogynist lecher attitude.
Yes.
Like, packaged up as a sexy lady hitting on an ace woman who has zero interest in her. But like still the level of dismissiveness, like, yeah, just throw a pain weave on, set it to simmer and put a timer on for 6 hours and then check and see if she's done yet. Like it feels like the right kind of lazy to match up with that personality. Like,
yeah. What's crazy to me is I see no evidence of a historian in Halima.
Yeah, there is in... This isn't the one who gives the lecture about the historians, because Balthabel like literally never gets to talk. So I'm not thinking of the same person. We've got 2 historians in The Forsaken. Well, 2 academics. Multiple academics. But I think 2 historians.
Many academics, yeah.
So, yeah, This is not a guy who was a top-rate historian. This is like a Jordan Peterson sort of historian. Like, yeah, buddy. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Sure.
He feels like a, just a real asshole. Just like, and like a second-rate Forsaken, right? Like,
rate.
Why was he in the 13?
Honestly.
Yeah, third rate.
I feel like Bilal is more impressive, so that's saying something.
Yeah, I feel like Agenor was more impressive. He at least created the
fucking Trollocs, like, Jesus.
As a scientist.
That is some top-shelf evil shit.
He created all the Shadow Spawn, not just the Trollocs. He's basically created the armies of the Shadow.
None of the problems that, like, so many weapons were developed specifically to deal with Shadow Spawn. He is the mother and the father of Shadow Spawn. Like, he is the parent from which all the Shadow Spawn spring.
So we get this big paragraph about Halima, how Egwene, she's the one person she can relax around and how precious that is. And she doesn't see her as Forsaken and all that kind of stuff. Or as Amerlin Seat and all that kind of stuff. And it's just like, okay, that it still feels toxic. Like maybe you shouldn't be relaxing around her.
Especially coming from someone who couldn't allow Beonin to just fucking exist without trying to tear her down.
Right.
To allow Halima and be like, everyone else is such a judgy bitch. It's like, you hated Beonin's guts for the audacity to have boobs in a political context. Like, what the fuck?
I mean, I do think that is compulsion, right? I do think that is low-level compulsion to accept me and accept what I do. And, like, that's one of the ways that she gets away with doing whatever she wants is she sort of compels a few important people. It's tough, though. I don't see any evidence of her using that kind of compulsion.
Yeah, I don't see evidence of skill or talent with that. It's not in the entry. I was just reading his entry in the companion. And yeah, I guess, presumably, he knows how to use compulsion because he was a top-level evil guy. But we don't see evidence of that being utilized. We just see this very, like, simple cessation of pain manipulation, which is like anyone can do that. Like that's not a compulsion talent. That's just knowing how to apply the relief from pain at certain moments. Like, so, but it doesn't make sense with Egwene's character unless you throw in a level of compulsion. Like that's what makes it make sense with her.
Right. It's really easy to make your massages feel really good if you can stop causing pain whenever you massage somebody because you're causing the pain in the first place.
Cessation from pain is perhaps the most addictive drug because it's not a drug. It's a very real reality that your brain is deeply hardwired to require.
So, yeah, I mean, I guess that's what he's doing to Egwene is he's sort of making himself an addiction herself. The pronouns are hard with Halima, Balthamel, because we've been talking about Balthamel as a historical figure, but also then.
Yeah, I don't really give a shit for this particular character. Like they don't seem to give a shit, so I'm gonna follow their lead.
Right.
Just be like, you get all the pronouns. I'm gonna dead pronoun you because you have phases in your context and whatever. But yeah, it's so blatant.
I don't understand why Delana puts up with her. It's because she's a dark friend.
There's also a really interesting contradiction here. Her position as Delana's secretary was plainly a matter of charity. And then on the next page, she could be on hand with Egwene, and sleeping there must have given difficulties with carrying out her duties for Delana. So Egwene is literally thinking from one thought to the next that, well, clearly she's not actually doing anything but busy work for Delana because she can't do secretarial work. So, like, clearly whatever Delana's doing for her is busy work. But also she's completely accepting the notion that Halima's going out of her way and taking on extra difficulties to balance taking care of Egwene with her duties to Halima. Like, she is completely accepting that with no critical thinking. It just screams compulsion. It just... I love Egwene too much to just assume that this is her being a dumbass one time. It's compulsion. It has to be.
Well, maybe she knows the only business, or maybe what she thinks is the only duties Halima is fulfilling for Delana are nighttime duties. And that's why sleeping in Egwene's tent is such a burden.
Yeah.
Because then Halima and Delana basically can't fuck.
But Egwene is such a prude who doesn't acknowledge that gay people exist that seems like a very weird assumption for her to be making. Like, Egwene is very prudish when she deigns to think about sex at all. So, as much as I like that reasoning, it doesn't feel in character. Elaine would think like that. Elaine thinking that, I would believe.
Yeah, Elaine would. Yes. But it is canon that Halima is using Delana for sex, right? Am I? Yes.
Yes. It becomes more apparent when they're at Grandol's palace, but you can see hints of it here, and it definitely is suggested retroactively that, like, this started a long time ago. And it makes sense given the character, right? When he was in the Age of Legends, his entire arc was around impressing and dominating women. So with the ability to have complete control over Delana, like, yeah, Halima's definitely making that move fairly early on and just letting the facade slip more and more over time.
I love the reference to Egwene's chair that's constantly folding from underneath her.
She's still in that phase.
Yep. And the reason why she hasn't been able to get a new one, because there's more important things to do. And like, just, yeah, the analogy around her power and the seat with the bad leg work a little too well, Jordan. That's a little almost on the nose. The Amerlin seat is having problems with one leg that constantly folds.
Yeah. But that is the drum he's beating right now, and he is not going to let us forget it. I also love how Halima enjoys her reputation. Just a little by the by. Like, Halima on the inside remembering all of this Age of Legends stuff and like almost getting bound for being too violent and like all the judgments and all that baggage from the Age of Legends. Going through this camp being judged for being a slut. And the he-she dichotomy of that, she's just like laughing the whole time. She's incredibly amused by it. And Egwene's just like, what a strange sense of humor.
Right. But at the same time, Halima is 100% only interested in women, right? Because this wheelwright tries to grope her. She breaks his arm, I assume using the one power.
Yeah, seems likely. Because the body is rather weak. I mean, you can break someone's arm as a fairly weak person, but like, yeah, I assume the power because crudeness. Right.
And so that's the wheelwright's like, I don't know what happened because he's terrified of her.
Right. Because she broke his arm without touching him. Presumably, she just glared at him and like was close enough, but he knows that her hands didn't touch his arm and yet it broke. Right. Like, he knows that happened.
Right. And the Aes Sedai didn't see anything. So.
Right. Exactly. Like. And so presumably he's the one going crazy and they'll try to gentle him. So he's going to not fucking say anything. Right. And Halima is a luxury that to be treasured quite apart from her ability to deal with the headaches. Like that feels very compulsion-y. Because like you said, like Halima only values possessing women. Right. Like that's that character. No interest in men. Like the way she's insinuating herself into Egwene's whole space and the way Egwene thinks about her, it feels very abusive, right? She's in an abusive relationship with a narcissist.
Yes.
No, she's still in like the kind of the more love bomby phase. And then she gets that thing when the eyes change, right? Like Halima's eyes changed a little bit today when Egwene says no and the headache snaps into place. And she stomps out basically being like, I'm going to wait and see how long until you come crawling to me waiting for relief from this headache. And Egwene, with her Aiel badassitude, just powers through, much to Halima's frustration, I think.
Okay, so I wanted to talk about this quote from Suian, right? So she goes into Teleron Riyadh, and she's talking about 6 sisters from 5 Ajas fled the tower after Elaida carried out her coup. Her mouth twisted slightly on the word. And here we have one from each of those 5. And she's talking about Shuriam's 6, right? Like, what is this group that she's talking about? I guess I'm trying to pull that out of context.
This is the Aes Sedai. Wait.
Super Skylake says, yes, this is the Saladar 6. The 2 blues are Ananya and Shuriam. And it's just, it kind of feels like Suian is implying that they're spies sent by somehow that like, why 6 sisters from 5 Ajas fled the tower after the letter. Sitters. So I feel like maybe this is back in the sitter, trying to figure out why there's older sitters and younger sitters.
Yeah, because that's what comes up next. So she finds a partial list of sitters, or of sisters, and they're all 2 young, newly raised sitters because the tower's having the same problem. So yeah, it all feels like it's part of that same nothing burger. Like there's so many extra toppings on this nothing burger, but it is still a nothing burger.
It really is a nothing burger. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Okay. So that's just her. Okay. That just ties back into the nothing burger of sitters being too old. Oh, I wanted that to be something else.
Me too. But
there's this quote about Beonin, how she always thought she'd had gone scurrying back to Elaida if Shuriam and the others hadn't stiffened her backbone. Well, it's because she did, basically. She's a double agent. Yep.
She never was going to join the coup. The only reason she's here is because Elaida trusts her to be on Elaida's side. Like, yeah, your read of her is correct. Just not deep enough.
then all the politics about how Suian isn't really allowed to access Tel'aran'rhiod, so she has to borrow Leanne's access, which I don't know, that always kind of felt weird. It's like, why would they prevent her? She's like the most knowledgeable among them. She taught most of them. Because
she was mean to them and their feelings were hurt.
Yeah. Oh, no. Yeah. I don't know.
The Aes Sedai are so petty, it becomes unbelievable sometimes.
It's just such a petty thing that can be cut. Yeah.
But it does work out well, because then Suian gets access to a ter'angreal when Lyanna gets captured and no one knows to look for it on her. I mean, that ends up working out well for her. Oh, that's a good point. Yeah. Didn't think about that. Yeah. Because they think it was captured with her, even though Suian had it. So I guess that's what that's setting up, is the whole, like, Suan's going to have access to a Angreal and no one's going to know. A ter'angreal, a dream. Yeah. Yeah. I think this all can be summed up in this quote. If this turns out to be happenstance after all, Suian, you're going to regret ever thinking you saw a puzzle. Yep. Yeah, I regret it. We sure do. I'd really regret it. That's we sure do. Everyone's got a headache, not just Egwene. Yeah. So they've got a headache. They've talking about the agents, the Amyrlin's agents, which is just a recap. We know that she has access to Suan's agents because she's the Amyrlin seat. Yeah, and Lyanna has the agents inside the tower, which apparently no one has ever thought of before. Crime is spiking in Tar Valon. Yeah, the sisters are just locked up in the tower and not dealing with the city at all, and haven't been since perhaps before the siege, because they're just so concerned with themselves, which is not great. Suian is falling in love with Gareth Bryn. Gareth Bloody Bryn is no longer. These are all points that have been made over and over again in this timeline, or in this storyline, I should say. And the next thing that I think is important to talk about is depressing stories of people accepting their Shan-Chan overlords. They've got limited intel coming out of Shan-Chan held lands, but there are depressing stories of acceptance. The Shan-Chan, it seemed, were no worse rulers than any other, and better than some, as long as you were not a woman who could channel, and all too many people appeared to have given up thoughts of resistance once it became clear the Shan-Chan would let them go on with their lives. Rand struggles with that too, when he goes and checks out. He's like, what am I doing when I'm not even a good ruler as the slavers? Right? Like, what the hell is going on in my kingdom? Right, which I think is a valid question. It's not a reason to concede that the slavers are right after all, but it is a really, really important question that they are posing by virtue of having a society that doesn't suck as bad, doesn't suck worse for the common people who can't channel than, like, everything that's been coming before. Like, that is an are we the bad guys kind of come to Jesus moment. Totally. But yeah, the conclusion that Jordan leaves us with, which is that I guess you should just cut a deal with the slavers, is like not my favorite way to resolve that question. Oh, there's a little bit before that about Gawain, and I just wanted to point out here where she says the one way to bridge the gap with Gawain is to bond him, and that might lead to his death. And then she immediately says she knew she would bond him. Yeah. So that's cool. So yeah, you know bonding him is going to lead to his death and you're still going to do it? Well, cool. She doesn't do it until he's literally dying in front of her. Fair. She does save that until she's within moments of watching the last of his blood pour out. So, you know, she prolongs his life to end violently, but she does prolong it and manage to actually get laid in the real world. So, like, you know, I don't like how their relationship develops. I don't either. I want him to just go be an Andorran first prince and leave Egwene alone. Yeah. That's like where he should be. Just get to be Ace and unattached like she was supposed to be. Mm-hmm. Or, you know, her Shan-Chan warder, which I thought was a great way to come full circle. Oh my god, yes. Yes, her and Egionin. And Bail Domon just off to the side, like, I don't know what's happening, but it's fine. Right. I'm married to the Amyrlin Seat's order, I guess. Do be a weird place. Yeah, the Amyrlin Seat's bodyguard once removed. That would have been so excellent. That would have been kind of funny to have, like, Bail Domon and Naginin on both sides of her. The comic relief potential alone So worth it.
It honestly is Shakespeare's two guards standing out in the hallway making small talk, right? Like so many of his plays. But instead make those two guards Aegeanin and Beeldomon. Pretty funny.
I require this in my life. Oh, we've got a mention about Rhoda Iturralda and rumors surrounding him, including invading Saldaea, which is in fact what he will be doing. There will come a point at which Rhoda Iturralda is effectively invading Saldaea. That is a thing. It hasn't happened yet, I don't think, because we're only a tiny... Well, ooh. How long after the cleansing are we? A couple weeks?
Maybe not that long. How long? Because they just... The people they sent to investigate are just coming back.
Okay, right. Okay, so no, it hasn't happened yet. The whole invading Saldaea thing happens right when Darth Rand is getting his Darthiest. So that's definitely still a week or more in the future. Yeah, it's in Gathering Storm. It's way ahead. I also noticed that there's a mention of the Greens being obsessed with the Borderlanders, and I'm like, why aren't you obsessed with the Borderlanders strategically, Green Anja? That's what all your intel's about, but you don't actually take shifts up there? Fuck's wrong with you?
Yeah, go to the Borderlands. Well, now there are 50 to 200 sisters with the Borderlanders, which is a group that we almost never hear about. Anything about.
At all.
It's a huge group of sisters, right? Like up to 200?
I don't think it's 200. I think it's closer to 50. Or 13. No, it's 15? 13? It's not very many.
Oh, I thought it was quite a bit more
I think
than
that the rumor here is super exaggerated. If I'm recalling the scenes with the Borderlanders correctly, they have like in the teens.
Okay. It's more than 13 because Rand is threatened by them. But yeah, okay.
It's not 200 because that's like a quarter of all Aes Sedai in the world, which isn't no.
That's why I was like, that seems like a lot. But okay, maybe like 20 is a more reasonable number.
Yeah, because it's like each ruler has an advisor, and then they like pick up some more along the way, like in their travels south, and like. But yeah, they never really get like articulated or have anyone interesting come out of them or like do anything. They just kind of drift around being fluff in the background.
I mean, imagine as part of the Borderland army, they were useful in the last battle, right?
I'm going to imagine that, yes. I'm going to just close my eyes and imagine that that's what was happening the whole time. And that's why there were Aes Sedai up in the Borderlands.
They're not going to send anybody to Caemlyn because they've got Morel and Vandene. So why send more? Sure.
Yeah, lots of Aes Sedai politicking.
Egwene thinking of herself as green, which is ridiculous because she's gray.
Oh, but I like the concept of sex. First of all, no, you don't, evidently.
Yeah, I never understood why she wanted, just because she likes Gawain, therefore she must be green. She likes boys, Yeah,
the concept that that if you want to be the kind of Aes Sedai that has sex with your warder, you have to pick green is just absolute nonsense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you got Nynaeve out here being yellow, and she's definitely having sex with her warder.
Yeah, it's just like, and then I guess maybe it's that Egwene wants to fight. But I feel like she's more of a blue in her fighting tendencies. She's much more of a grab the cause with her bulldog teeth and never let go. Yeah,
blue or gray is what I'd put her as.
So, yeah, whatever with her love of the greens, but whatever. Like you're supposed to change your major while you're in school. Like advancing straight to PhD doesn't change the fact that you're still going to change your major like a couple years into school. All right, so... talk about the kin and the oath rod and the plans.
Yeah, we're just hitting a bunch of points that we've hit a million times here. The tower's been dwindling for 1,000 years. Now we've got novices back. Swearing on the oath rod shortens your life by half. No one wants to do that, so we're gonna do this whole thing with the kin. God, I don't see anything new in any of this.
And we talk about how the deal with the sea folk is going to play into that and how it's going to get hidden by that. And it's recapping a bunch of events from a perspective we haven't seen before, but because we're Watch spoilers, we've already been using these perspectives the whole time. So silence and flipping pages. Yes.
Sorry about that.
There's lots of book foley.
There's a little bit talk about Darlin being steward for Rand and how he's got rebels to deal with.
Yeah, there's a siege in the stone. That's apparently a big deal, much to everyone's surprise. And there's a thing about how they see Marana negotiating at that siege, which then leads to the whole unspooling of the fact that somebody has been compulsing Aes Sedai over there.
Oh, okay. So yeah, tell me, I wasn't sure how they made that jump that someone's been compelling Aes Sedai. I didn't fully follow their logic there.
It's because they're seeing Aes Sedai, who are definitely on opposite sides of the Tower conflict, apparently following Rand's orders and not being in conflict with each other. And the names that are attached to those stories are real names. And so they're like, something is actually happening here. This isn't just bizarre rumors. There's enough corroborating evidence that something has to explain why these sisters who should be in opposition to each other are all behaving in such an uncharacteristic way towards Rand. They just connect those dots and decide that compulsion has to be the explanation. They're not even seeing a lot of the behavior that we know is proof of the compulsion, like the asking to be beaten and all of that. They're just seeing the apparent, visible public deference and leaping straight to compulsion from that.
And how much of that is compulsion and how much of it is just like to veer in? And because like I know there is that group of people that Varen compelled, but there's definitely Aes Sedai who sworn to Rand who weren't compelled to it.
I agree. I think that a lot of it is Taviran, particularly the ones who were not Elida's people, but they're still following Rand's orders. And Egwene and Swan have, their pearl clutching and their feathers ruffled. I'm like, well, only compulsion could explain a sister obeying Rand. And that's not true. Taviran and the fallout from Dumai's Wells as a turning point made that happen. But also, compulsion is motivating some of them.
Yeah. Yeah. Specifically, the one we just saw, Balefire.
Yes.
Osangar. Not Balefire,
yes,
but
coruscating. Our new word of the day. Our coruscating
fire. Maybe that's what in the prologue Rand used, or Lewis Theron used to create Dragonmount. Coruscating fire. Yeah. Different than Balefire.
We'll go with that.
But it obviously melts hilltops or holes in the ground.
It does vaporize stone. Yes, very much so. We also get a fun little side plot about Chesa and her weird teas that she thinks help Egwene's headaches, and so she gets just all kinds of whatever quack medicine from peddlers on the side of the road because one time it seemed to help maybe, and Egwene just consumes it because she doesn't want to make Chesa feel bad. And it's like a running bit. And this is the first time that bit starts and she drinks the tea, and it seems like everything gets better because I guess Halima gets distracted and turns off the weave or whatever. But poor Egwene ends up consuming who knows what random herbs from like the roadside ditch because Chesa is super gullible.
I always thought Chesa would be a good red herring for Arangar.
Yeah, totally. She's right there.
But we know exactly who Arangar is, so it's not like... It's like, are you trying to trick us, Jordan? Because you're showing us the trick at the same time. So it's not working.
He was trying to obfuscate what he was doing in plain sight with just a sheer wall of text.
I guess, yeah. There is a wall of text for these two chapters. Wow, is it ever. Talking about Codswain, I love that Suian is convinced that Codswain is a dark friend. Or, I don't know she's dark friend, I just suspect.
Yeah, well, because Codswain has always been in opposition to her and suspicious of her. And if you're in opposition to what Swan's ultimate mission is, for decades, clearly you're a dark friend.
You must be a dark friend.
And, like, it's funny.
Meanwhile, she's trusting Varen, who is a dark friend.
Meanwhile, Codswain's also trusting Varen.
Right. Yeah, both of them are.
And Codswain doesn't think that Swan is anything but an incompetent child. She doesn't think that Swan is a dark friend. Like, that suspicion is not returned. She's just like, oh my God, you bungled everything.
Yeah, well, that's the way Codswain feels about everybody, so...
And then Egwene makes herself drink the tea down as sort of a penance for being so hard and ambitious. And I notice it's kind of paired there that, like, she's going to use the fact that Rand compelled sisters as political leverage, and that just feels really gross to her. So she makes herself drink the tea. And I was just like, she's kind of leaning into her wisdom energy there. She's being her own wisdom and being like, you drink that disgusting medicine as punishment.
So, okay, what leverage does she... Because, again, I don't remember her ever using that leverage anywhere that Rand used compulsion. Was she going to use it against him? Was she going to use it, like, yeah.
I feel like she uses it as an implicit, like, you know what Rand's been doing to us, so you'd better listen to me. Like, I feel like it's just some fluffy fucking political game of houses, Aes Sedai nonsense. I don't think it's anything more than that. It's not like she actually uses this information. She just sort of looks significantly while making a speech, and like, that's all you need, apparently.
Well, and I feel like a lot of her plans do get derailed because she gets kidnapped, right? She has all these plans to manipulate the Aes Sedai around her. Meanwhile, she heads out to, Quendiar chain, and then she gets kidnapped and doesn't put any of these plans into effect.
Like with so much art, when you sit down and try to do the thing, it doesn't work. But if you're just like, fuck it, we'll do it live, then it's fine. Like, that's kind of her political manipulation. She's getting bogged down and stuck. She needs to be broken out and thrown onto an improv stage. And then suddenly everything's effective again. Which
is why she gets kidnapped. I think it's the pattern.
Yeah, the pattern is so fucking over the slog. The pattern's like, get the fuck out. Come on,
yeah,
move.
It really
move.
Is. out. Yep.
And then, yeah, we get the news that Akaran and the others have returned from Shadar Logoth. And that gives us our readout to an actual, not cliffhanger, but a good pause point before we can dig into Shadar Logoth and the aftermath of the cleansing, which we will be pairing with Moghedien witnessing the end of the cleansing. So that will be a nice chapter pairing for us all to look forward to next week.
That'll be a fun little come together.
Yes.
I can't wait.
You ain't got anything else before I read us out?
I do not.
As she set the cup down with a sharp clink of metal on wood, Anaya pushed into the tent, mouth turned down and a frown creasing her plain face. Akaran and the others have returned, Mother, she said. Moria told me to inform you she has called the Hall to hear their report. So have Escaralda and Melind, Morvran announced, coming in behind Anaya with Morel. The green seemed an image of serene fury, if that was possible, her olive face smooth and her eyes like dark embers. But Morvran wore a scowl to make Anaya look pleased. They're sending novices and accepted running to find all the sitters, the Brown said. We can't catch a whisper of what Akaran found, but I think Escaralda and the others intend to use it to prod the Hall towards something. Peering at the dark dregs floating in a few drops in the bottom of the pewter cup, Egwene sighed. She would have to be there, too, and now she would have to face the sitters with a headache and that awful taste in her mouth. Perhaps she could call it a penance for what she was going to do to the Hall. Oh yeah, her headache does vanish during the meeting because the news hits Delana and Halima gets distracted. Pretty sure that's exactly what happens.
And just a small reference, apparently in New Spring, Moraine thinks Codswain is Black Hotjaw because of her experiences in that book. So that's a leftover thing from New Spring and I do think that when that book came out, Jordan was trying to imply that Codswain may be black, right? Because if you're reading these in published order, you would have read New Spring right before this book.
No, that makes sense. Yeah.
And so there's definitely this like implication that maybe she's not everything, that this new advisor actually doesn't have Rand's best interests at heart.
Yeah, because way back when, Swan's lover, her only partner on the whole ass mission, was like, I'm pretty sure Codswain's a dark friend. And I literally had to deal with that Red Hill bitch and who almost killed me. So every reason to distrust Codswain, regardless of the lack of evidence. Like, that is basically evidence. as far as Swan's concerned. So that makes sense. But yeah, shit's about to pop off. Halima and Delana do not take the news of the cleansing very well, as I recall. It's not when they leave, but I do believe that Egwene's headache stops because of this news arriving. But yeah, everyone, thank you for powering through with us for basically 2 hours, 20 minutes. I'm fucking brain dead. I don't know why we bother doing double headers. We're the worst.
Because it would have been awful to do that 2 weeks in a row.
Can't we go faster?
No, we're us. We're us.
Why are we us? Why do we have to be us?
We skipped a lot. There were so many pages where we just went, yeah, and then this happens, and then this, or yeah, this is 4 pages of us skipping.
I am proud of us for all that skipping.
There's tons of crap that we just went right over in those. Because that was only slightly longer than a normal recording, and we got through both chapters. It is better than doing it 2.5 hour recordings. They're long chapters.
Yeah.
They're long chapters. Yeah. They're hard to podcast about.
I'm so ready for Knife of Dreams.
Yeah, I am so ready for Knife of Dreams. And I'm kind of sad that we're losing the last of Winter's Heart here.
Yeah, 2 more weeks and then we're done.
Yeah, but I do think the end of Crossroads, there's much more POV switching. We get Matt, we get Perrin, we get Rand. We're not quite as into the name Salad. He really does. He's got a stronger ending of this book than the beginning.
Yeah. Nonetheless, I'm just fucking over it.
Yeah. We'll make it. Don't let Crossroads of Twilight stall us out. We just did...
This is the hardest read through of Crossroads I've ever done.
We've got 11 more chapters.
I've never hated Crossroads as much.
Because it's in so much detail.
As I do now. I've never had such a hard time with Crossroads. Normally I'm just whatever, but this one I'm just I will burn this book.
I thought the Egwene stuff would be better, but this is awful. This chapter in particular, the amount of recap on stuff we have discussed 7 or 8 times already. I mean, it was rough. And we're not, usually the recap stuff is in the beginning of the book. We are in the middle, towards the 2/3 into this book, right? We're on chapter 19 out of 30. We're well into this book and we're getting recap. It's Jordan. Wow. Yeah. You can tell his heart wasn't in this.
Yeah. He was trying to paddle his way towards the main current, but he was stuck in an eddy.
Mm-hmm. This definitely feels when the teacher is like, all right, I need 1,000-word paper from you. And you're like, and so therefore, upon the beginning of my story, I shall tell you a story, therefore.
Yep. Except that, Jordan is already a best-selling author and doesn't need to fucking do that.
No, he really doesn't. He really didn't at this point. But, we don't know. People talk about it. He was pretty sick at this point, right?
No excuse.
He was taking less. No excuses. No excuses. But Knife of Dreams is so good. That's the thing. We read this and then we go, but Knife of Dreams was really good.
He was just trying to paddle his way back to the main current after getting lost in an eddy. And Knife of Dreams is when he caught that current again. Maybe it's because he knew he was going to die. Maybe it's just because he managed to get all of his pieces lined up so he could do a cool domino. I don't know. But I'm so ready for it.
But I firmly believe everything up to this point. Yeah, and I've told you I'm working on a rewrite.
Better at it.
Where I sort of re-edit. I want to re-edit the 3 books that I consider the slog down into 1 book. And let me tell you, not much of Crossroads is going to make it into the final cut. This is just not going to.
Yeah, would love to have that. Couldn't you have made that before we podcasted?
No, because there's no way to do it without what we're doing to see what's valuable and my highlights. And yeah, no, it's. But I do want to put a version of those 3 books out there that people can read that will tell them everything they need to know.
I love that. I love it.
Now, that's my ambition. I've had many ambitions. I have not always completed projects that I've had ambitions about. So we'll see. This is a lot of work. But I really do want to put out, because who's one of when Star Wars came out with the prequels, man, I have a hard time watching them. They feel very sloggy to me. A lot happens, but I like the plot. I like being able to watch the prequels before I watch the, main trilogy. And so when the Phantom Edit came out, which was this basically re-edit of the original 3 movies down into one, 4-hour movie. It's a long movie, right? But it's one movie. And I like to watch that. And I think that's quite good. And that does a good job of prepping me for the series and reminding me what's going on. That I really feel like you can do something similar with these 3 books, which is cut them down into one singular book that can kind of take the place, tell you everything that's happened, and eliminate the just slow pace of the slog.
I look forward to you definitely finishing that.
I have done the mechanical part of it in that I have exported the words into a document that I can edit. And I have them all lined up. So I have a docx document with 3 books back to back to back to back in it. Now I just have to do the cutting.
Well, do you want to cut recording on that note? All right.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?